What is up guys, Tristendo here. The Steam Deck reached its first birthday this year and ended up being my favorite console, in fact, my favorite gadget in the past decade. What does the Steam Deck do that led me to this conclusion? Let's check it out. In case you're unfamiliar with the Steam Deck, it's essentially a gaming PC stuffed into the body of a handheld gaming device with a form factor similar to a Nintendo Switch. I know some gaming enthusiasts would be mad that I called it a console in the title, and to them I would say, it is one. Because by default, it is running on a gaming-focused OS with a focus on gaming, and by default gives you an exclusive storefront to purchase games in the form of Steam. But that's where the similarity to other consoles end, however, and the magic of the Steam Deck really shines. Let's start with the design of the Steam Deck. I won't try to hide it. This thing is a chonky boy, especially when you think of handhelds. An obvious, relevant comparison is to the Nintendo Switch. The base model Switch with Joy-Cons attached can fit inside the entire size of the Steam Deck. Don't be fooled though. The size may be bigger than many are used to, but it is much lighter than I was expecting. Combine this with the contoured grips on the system and it makes for a very comfortable handheld experience. Valve, the company behind the Steam Deck and known worldwide for their famous PC game store, Steam, spent a lot of R&D time to perfect the size and comfortability of the Steam Deck. Even after many hours of handheld play, the system doesn't fatigue my arms or hands the same way the Switch did. The Nintendo Switch's flat system design is visually appealing, but doesn't make for a long-term comfortable gaming session. A common solution that Switch users use is the Hori Split Pad Pro, which replaces Joy-Cons with bulkier but more comfortable controllers on the side. So think of that concept, but being permanently attached to the Steam Deck on its side. Fan noise is audible while playing intensive games, but isn't enough to be distracting, and Valve designed the thermals to stay in the center and away from your hands so you'll never feel the heat emanating from the sides where the grips are, which is a very nice attention to detail. The design of the Steam Deck is fully realized when you want to play games comfortably lying in bed, if you have a busy lifestyle and you want to play for only 5 minutes at a time, or if you want to spend time with family or your partner during downtime without being separated and having to be in a different room to play your PC games. Valve stuffed the Steam Deck with a plethora of controller options and customization. Immediately you'll notice that there are trackpads on the left and the right of the Steam Deck below the control sticks. These are super helpful for controlling PC games or PC games that work better with mouse cursor movements versus a control stick and have a haptic feedback that feels similar to rumble while using them. The trackpads are also essential for navigating the built-in desktop mode on the Steam Deck. More on that later. The traditional A, B, X, and Y buttons are on the far right and are in an Xbox controller layout. You can tell Valve really pushing what they can put on the system, as the buttons are so far close to the edge that they have the illusion that they're almost sliding off of the system. Overall, these buttons are tactile, clicky, and responsive. The earlier mentioned control sticks feel very nice and are much more comfortable than Nintendo Switch's Joy-Cons. They feel closer to an Xbox One control stick, and the fluidity, range of movement, and even the size and overall height of the control sticks are a pleasure to use versus the Joy-Cons. Not to mention no issues with drift. The shoulder buttons are clicky, though with my particular unit I need to press harder than I would like to register R1 sometimes. L2 and R2 are satisfying and have a full range of motion when pressing them. The Steam Deck even has 4 customizable back buttons that are helpful for shortcuts or mapping extra controls depending on the game. But if we're being honest, personally, I barely use these buttons. The D-pad is one of the best D-pads on a handheld, beaten only by Nintendo's traditional D-pads and things like the Switch Pro controller. There are buttons below the trackpads on the left and the right. The Steam button gives you your settings menu with options to navigate home, visit the store, go to settings, and more. The button below the trackpad on the right brings up the quick access menu where you can customize things like your gameplay, overlay which shows frame rate, battery usage, stats on the system like GPU usage, and more. The menu also allows for customizing a per profile frame rate option per game, and this is the menu many tinkerers will have the most fun with. The two smaller buttons on the top left and right act similar to a start and select menu option, which differs from game to game. One of my favorite control features on the Steam Deck is that if you place your thumb or finger on the top of the control stick, it will recognize that your hand is there and will turn on the gyroscopic controls if you choose to turn this control feature on. This is an amazing added touch, as the gyro controls will only be activated anytime your finger is lightly resting on the control stick. A great free game that Valve developed for demonstrating the Steam Deck controls is called Aperture Desk Job, and I recommend this game to any new Steam Deck owner so they can get a chance to familiarize themselves with the system controls. Remember how I said that you can customize the controls on Steam Deck? Not only can you map buttons on the back or remap any existing button, there are template and layouts for different games that the community uploads for you to use, and you can apply gyro controls to almost any game and switch between controller options and traditional mouse and keyboard options. Got a Nintendo Switch Pro controller or Joy-Cons? You can use those. PlayStation DualShock or DualSense? No problem. Xbox 360 or Elite controllers? Use them to your heart's content. It's really crazy, as any control scheme you can imagine, from gyro on a PS5 DualSense controller to traditional keyboard and mouse, will work on Steam Deck. The display on the Steam Deck is a 7-inch touchscreen LCD panel with a 1280 by 800p resolution and a 16 by 10 aspect ratio. A resolution like this would look blurry blown up on a 60-inch 4K TV, but condensed into a small 7-inch display makes every game look sharp and more than playable. One thing to note is that because it's 800p and not a traditional 720p display, there are some games that don't have an 800p option, and thus there are very thin black borders on the top and bottom in some games like Elden Ring when playing in 720p. Aside from that, running games in 720p HD is perfect for this system, as it also lessens the load on the GPU output, as it doesn't have to work so hard to push more pixels than needed. The colors on the display are average at best and definitely look muted compared to an OLED display, but for gameplay, this panel is more than serviceable. People in the community even created plugins, such as a plugin called Vibrant Deck, which makes the colors on the Steam Deck more saturated and, as in the name tells, more vibrant. While the colors won't be accurate, it is an option for those who aren't a fan of the muted colors on the Steam Deck display. Side note, the 512GB Steam Deck model comes with a matte-edged anti-glare glass, so that's the only difference for the display in terms of model. This is one of the things about the Steam Deck that really surprised me: the performance. We finally come to a point in technology where we can fit the power of a base model PlayStation 4 into something that can fit into the palm of your hands. The Steam Deck features an AMD APU, which includes a Zen 2 CPU and an RDNA 2 GPU and up to 1.6 teraflops. It has 16GB of DDR5 RAM, and each Steam Deck comes with either a 64GB eMMC drive, which is the slowest and the speed of a cheap SD card, 256GB SSD, which is faster, or 512GB SSD drive, which is the fastest speed option and the highest capacity that they sell. The kinds of games I can play handheld are only things I can dream of in the past, and definitely not games that run on Nintendo Switch. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered from Sony plays at 40 FPS at 800p. Elden Ring? Check. God of War? You got it. Cyberpunk? Horizon Zero Dawn? Red Dead Redemption? Even newer titles like the remastered Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space? You can play them all. Of course, the experience varies from game to game, and if you are someone coming from consoles, you may not like the fact that you'll need to tinker with the settings to get the most out of each game. For example, if a game is graphically intensive and you want to save on battery life, you can actually go to the previously mentioned quick access menu and lower the TDP and the frame rate for the game. This will lower performance, obviously, but you can squeeze out an hour or so of battery just from these changes in the settings. A huge advantage, and what makes a lot of the graphics options possible, is the options for FSR or Fidelity FX. Basically, it renders a game at lower resolution so the GPU doesn't have to work as hard, and then upscales the resolution to the desired output. An example is, while the Steam Deck is docked, using FSR will have the Steam Deck render the game at 720p, and then FSR upscales it to reach 1080p HD without actually having to work as hard to reach that end goal. The results can sometimes end with some ghosting in character models when moving, but personally, I think this is well worth the performance output. To put it simply, the battery life you'll get out of the Steam Deck depends on what games you play. If you are playing the latest blockbuster AAA games and you've tweaked the settings to save on battery life, you can expect at most 2 to 4 hours of battery life. Playing 2D games like Hades or indie games like Tunic will result in much longer battery life, and you can reach an upwards of 6 to 8 hours. The most impressive feature of the battery life to me is the standby time. Similar to the Switch, you can put the Steam Deck into sleep mode, and if you had a game paused in suspension, you simply wake the Steam Deck from sleep and get right back into where you were in your game in seconds. The standby time for when the Steam Deck is asleep is crazy good. I've left my Steam Deck asleep and unused on full battery during a busy week and came back to it with 50% battery still left in the tank. Of course, if you're going to be traveling, then the 45-watt power adapter is a must, or any charger that can match or exceed that rating, like the 67-watt USB-C Anchor charger. Steam Deck only has a few ports: a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is rare to see in this day and age, a micro SD card slot, and a singular USB-C port. Now, this USB-C port's primary purpose is to charge the Steam Deck, but also the main way to connect any peripheral you can think of to the Steam Deck, from keyboards, mice, DVD players, external drives, and so on. When playing docked, I use Anker's docking station to connect one Thunderbolt USB-C cable, and it automatically connects to all of my connected devices like my mouse, keyboard, and monitor. For those who don't already have a USB-C hub of some kind, Valve sells an official Steam Deck dock that also acts as a stand that is made specifically with the Steam Deck's design in mind, though any USB Type-C hub should do the trick. Keep in mind that you can actually open up the Steam Deck and upgrade the SSD yourself to a higher capacity than what you bought, but Valve doesn't recommend this, as the SSD they chose are specifically approved by their guidelines in terms of voltage, heat, interference with the Wi-Fi card, power draw, and so on. This hasn't stopped Steam Deck owners from buying a 64GB model and upgrading the SSD to a 1TB SSD. If you have the skills and know-how, this is an option that you can try to take and save a few bucks if you're willing to open up the Steam Deck. The easiest option to upgrade storage, and what most people would do, is to slap a micro SD card into the SD card slot and call it a day. This is essential, especially if you purchase a 64GB model, as Steam games are typically 40GB and up for each game. Quick note on the speakers, they're actually way better than they have any right to be. Now, they aren't going to replace your dedicated gaming headset or portable speaker, but the quality of the sound and how loud it gets is crazy considering how much they are already crammed into this tiny space. Now, what defines a gaming system or console the most is the games. Technically, the Steam Deck launched with the most launch titles of any console-like system, as it has access to thousands of PC titles from Steam. This includes games purchased from Steam all the way back to the late 1990s. The best part about the Steam Deck's game selection is that if you were an existing PC player before and you have a large Steam library, almost all of those games are instantly playable on deck. For those who aren't already invested in the Steam ecosystem, get ready to spend. It feels like it's every other week that Steam has sales in their Steam store, with popular blockbuster games often having frequent sales, and many of them are 50% off. I also like how for each single player game, you get free Steam cloud storage for games that back up automatically, so you can play on your PC and pick up right where you left off on the same game on the Steam Deck. Purchases you make on Steam will carry over to other PCs and computers you have, whereas on consoles, it isn't always guaranteed to have backwards compatibility on their next new system, and oftentimes you'll have to fork over money for games you already purchased in the previous generation. I keep talking about Steam, but here's the real kicker. Unlike consoles like Sony's PlayStation and Microsoft's Xbox, where you're locked into one game storefront, you can download any game from other companies' launchers like Blizzard's launcher, so you can have access to games like Overwatch 2 or Diablo. Valve's open source approach to both their software and hardware is very consumer friendly, and I really hope this trend bleeds into other parts of the industry and beyond. The issue, though, is that Steam Deck is running Windows games on an operating system that isn't Windows. Valve's amazing solution to this is called Proton. which is a compatibility layer that translates Windows games and allows them to run smoothly on SteamOS. What this also means is that not every single game will work 100% on Steam Deck because of this. Luckily, Valve has a categorizing system that lists games that are verified, meaning they pass all their guidelines on what is their criteria for being playable. They also have other categories such as playable, meaning that the game runs but may have some minor issues like small text or launcher pop-ups. They also have unplayable, which is self-explanatory, and unknown, which means they haven't tested it yet. Many games that fall under the unplayable or unknown category can oftentimes actually be playable. An example I found is Batman Arkham Knight, which runs at 40 to 60 frames per second at full settings, yet is listed under unplayable. If you have a large Steam library already, I would be confident to say at least 2/3 of your library is playable with no tweaking required on the Steam Deck. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, the Steam Deck, yeah, it's a dream for emulating games. It can emulate games from the Game Boy, PS1, PS2, PS3, GameCube, Xbox, Xbox 360, Nintendo DS, Wii U, the Nintendo Switch, and more. I won't go as far as to showing how to emulate all these games, but there are popular plugins like the EmuDeck that preloads all of the emulators for you, and this alone opens up a whole universe of games to explore. Even after mentioning the fact that the Steam Deck is a gaming PC, many are still almost dumbfounded when I plug the Steam Deck in and use a keyboard and mouse to navigate to its desktop mode. This mode is accessible in the settings and you can switch to it anytime. It basically is there if you want to use your Steam Deck more like a PC, but its most helpful feature is in customizing settings and plugins for the Steam Deck, where you would normally have a harder time in gaming mode. Gaming mode is what most people who don't like to tinker will stay in, as it simulates a console-like experience and is easier to control with a traditional controller. Desktop mode reveals the Steam Deck's software foundation in the form of an Arch-based Linux operating system. For those unaware, Linux is an open source computer operating system alternative to Microsoft Windows and Apple's Mac OS. You can use this mode to continue playing games in Steam or productivity like word processing, video editing, web browsing, watching content, and more. Since Steam Deck is a PC at its core, there's nothing stopping you from booting Windows onto it for games that for whatever reason can't run on Linux or SteamOS due to anti-cheat software or Proton compatibility. Playing Fortnite with the boys, for example, is only possible when booting into Windows, since some anti-cheat software doesn't work on Linux, meaning some games like the mentioned Fortnite, Destiny 2, and Valorant will have you resorting to Windows in order to play. My solution is to use SteamOS for 99% of the gaming time on Steam Deck, and if there's a rare game that requires Windows, I'll boot off an external SSD or micro SD card with Windows on it. Learning about all the things the Steam Deck can do, how much do they cost? Well, the 64GB base model starts at $399, the 256GB model starts at $529, and the 512GB model comes in at $649. They all have the same performance and specs and only differ in storage capacity and speeds, except the 512GB model, which has an etched anti-glare screen. They also all come with a carrying case, which is a nice bonus, and other companies would rather have you spend an additional $20 for this alone. As an added bonus, the 256GB model and 512GB model comes with a Steam community profile, and the 512GB model has an exclusive carrying case. The price is the biggest win for the Steam Deck from price to performance, and is so competitive that other handheld PCs in the market, such as the GPD Win or IO Neo, can't compete on price, as all of them start at around $700 to $1,000 and up. Valve is able to compete here as they can make up the loss in hardware sales in software sales through Steam. When the Steam Deck first launched a year ago, it came out as a buggy mess with tons of potential. Now, exactly a year later,
happy birthday, Steam Deck!
The Steam Deck is ironed out and living up to its potential and more. This device is a tinkerer's dream, and while that is a huge pro for the system, it's also its biggest downside. Console players who want the plug-and-play experience may be frustrated with having to tweak the right settings for each game or troubleshooting PC-related bugs or glitches. Luckily, I purchased this around October of 2022, and many of the bugs that existed then, and even before that time, have all been fixed and are now irrelevant to mention at this time of the review. With this device alone, it has been able to replace all my consoles and can play PlayStation, Xbox, and even Nintendo games. It allows those who are on the go, those with busy lifestyles, or those who want to be closer to loved ones while playing a game, a chance to go through their backlog. All of this makes it the perfect device for me and many others. I'm excited for what the future of the Steam Deck has in store, and as of right now, it's my favorite gadget of the past decade. If you guys enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video and subscribe so I can continue to make videos that I hope can help people with their tech decisions. Until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.